That's good. All right, shh. Good Thursday morning, and welcome back to Commentators Corner. This is episode number 12. Tyler Reedy and Brennan Preisman back with you. And Brennan, we're going to change things up a little bit today, deviate from our usual schedule of college football, NFL, all that, and make this one today exclusively about prep football. Always been our top priority, and unfortunately, after last week's loss to Grand Island, the two of us have seen our days of covering prep football come to an end, but today we've got plenty of time to just sit back and look back at all the great memories we've had over the last 3 years. It should be fun.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's a little concerning that we're not doing a full gamut of the sports this week because the first college football playoff rankings came
That's
out.
true.
A lot of NFL stuff going on. Lot of NFL stuff. There was just a big hockey trade that went down this morning. The Braves won the World Series. I mean, there's a lot we could be talking about.
And we'll see if we have some time at the end. Maybe we could get to that.
But as you said, this is really more about prep football and all the great memories we've had covering that for the past 3-4 years. So I did come up with a couple categories for this. And my first one is, what was your favorite play to call?
I mean, this is probably the obvious answer, probably too obvious, but the scoop and score from Ryan Carney against Millard West still, I mean, just the way that entire game turned. The start of that season was really interesting to watch for prep because you had the shutout, blowout loss to Westside, and then you barely beat Papio, and then we were supposed to have our first game, the two of us covering against Bellevue West, week 3, and then COVID hit the Saturday before it, so that was taken out. So you got a 1-1 start. The team looks pretty sloppy up to that point. And then they come back and go on the road to Lincoln Southeast and nearly pull off a massive comeback in that one, but end up losing by 3. And then Millard West comes around. We finally get our first home game. It's actually senior night, even though it was the first home game of the year. And Prep goes down 9-0 at halftime and then has a really ugly third quarter to end up trailing 26-0 going into the fourth. And, I mean, the rest is history. I mean, I just still can't believe that even happened.
That's definitely one of my favorite memories. Although I'll go with a more recent one. I will say that anytime Jack Stessman disappeared into the pile and somehow...
Yeah, those were fun.
He's done that multiple times. Somehow it's just, okay, it looks like he's going to be a 6. Oh, no, wait, there's number 22 in the end zone. Oh, that's fun. Those are fun to call just because, like, you get the unfiltered reaction of the announcer, too. I'm always just as surprised as everyone else is that Stessman is able to do the things he's able to do. So, those kinds of plays are fun as well.
Yeah, how about the career that Jack Stessman had? I mean, he's a guy that spent the first couple seasons in the prep football program dealing with injuries. Even the start of junior year last year, he was injured through the first few games of the season, didn't get to become the starting running back until I think that Millard West game, and after that he ended up going for close to 1,000 yards junior year, and then this year with the emergence of Marty Brown, kind of joins into a tandem, 1-2 punch of running backs that proved to be really effective. So he wasn't necessarily the guy anymore, but when Marty went down against Lincoln East final week of the regular season and Jack had to become the starter, I mean, it was unbelievable watching what he did. 190 yards and 4 touchdowns. Was it 4 touchdowns against Lincoln East and then 4 more and 220 yards against Grand Island. I mean, wow.
He did all he could over those past couple of weeks. He could smell the state playoffs on his back, and he was going to carry prep as far as he could take. I mean, it's a little unfortunate that it only ended up being the first round. That brings me to the next category, and that is best prep career.
Did last year on both sides of the football. Just really put the team on his back at times, was sensational. I love the season that Michael Barrett had defensively this year at linebacker. The leadership he brought to the team was pretty incredible to watch. Every time Prep did the white and the blue with the fans after the game, he was always
right there in the front.
He was always right there in the front, thanking the fans, bringing the energy, thanking them for their energy. And, I mean, the leadership he brought to the team was incredible this year. It's a big reason Prep's defense was so good for so long.
Yeah.
And then he said partial careers, and I think the way I'm going to interpret that is career that started but is about to absolutely blow up, and that's the career of Marty Brown as well as the line in front of him, because Marty Brown ran for well over 1,000 yards, I think 16 touchdowns, 15 on the ground, 1 receiving this year. And he's only a junior, and the whole offensive line in front of him, those are all juniors, and a couple of those guys are really solid names like Sam Sledge and Cole Jarrett, Rocco Marcelino. Sledge especially could get D1 looks in the future, and I know a couple others might as well, just with the way they played this year. But next year, I mean, if Prep can have just a decent quarterback and decent receivers and a pretty good defense, it's going to be scary to watch, I think.
I mean, I'm going to be perfectly honest. Sledge was one of the first names I thought of when I came up with that category, simply because he was a key part of the line as a sophomore, comes in as a junior, and now he's basically the leader of the line. He's still got another year to go with almost certainly the most talented guy we've seen in our 4 years at Prep running the ball behind him. So his career could shoot up into that stratosphere as well, as could Marty Brown's. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of next year Marty's getting some, like, all-Nebraska looks, because he is that talented.
Yeah, I think Iowa State's already taking a peek at him. He just got invited to their game against Texas over at Ames this weekend, so good for him. Hope you have fun there, Marty.
Well, I didn't have fun last time I went to Ames, but there's several reasons for that.
Yeah, I don't think Marty's a Texas fan, so
well,
he'll be all right.
He'll be fine.
Yeah. So, I think what was the next category? Best performance?
Yeah, best performance.
There's a lot of these.
Yeah, for this one, though, I feel like it's probably Marty against Millard West from earlier this year. I mean, there were multiple times on the sideline in the third and fourth quarter where you and I turned to each other in just, like, disbelief. Like, how has he not stopped running yet? It was just one of those games where Prep was kind of being outplayed. If I'm going to be completely honest.
Oh, yeah. First half, Millard West was definitely the better team.
Millard West was by far the better team in that game, I think. But Prep had the better player, and that was able to get him the win. Like, looking at Marty's box score, 32 carries, 250 yards, 2 scores, 1 catch for 37 yards and a touchdown.
Come on.
I mean,
it's a lot of fantasy points.
Like, maybe you could go with one of the Stessman games from the past couple of weeks if you're more of a touchdowns type of guy, but I don't see how anyone can just beat that total yardage and just how much Marty put the team on his back that game.
Yeah, and you mentioned Stessman, and I'm going to look at one of his performances just in the long-term scope of Prep football. I go back to his 240-yard, 2-touchdown game against North Platte last year, because basically my whole Prep career covering football up to that point, the Junior Jays didn't have that much of a run game. They didn't have a 100-yard rusher before the North Platte game last year. I don't think they might have had one 100-yard rusher my whole sophomore year, our whole sophomore year in 2019. But that North Platte game last year was the week after Millard West, so Prep had a lot of momentum coming in. They had run the ball pretty well against the Wildcats. I think Stessman had 95 yards and a touchdown or something like that. George Egan added 45 or 50. And then,
You're talking about sophomore year?
Junior year, okay. 2020, yeah.
Junior year, okay.
Yep. So that was after Millard West. North Platte came along, and North Platte was a top 10 team. Obviously, you got to take a long drive to get out there, so Prep easily could have come out flat and had a rough outing, but Jack Stessman just put the team on his back. I mean, it felt like he was falling forward after every single carry, picking up as many yards as possible, ended up with 240 of them, and honestly, that really started a new era of Prep football, I feel like, because after that, Stessman had another 150-plus yard game against Papio South. And Prep was a different team after that, quite frankly, because they really had an identity on offense. They could run the ball. They didn't look kind of confused and all over the place, which can happen a lot early in the season when the run game isn't there. But having that run game at the end of last year and then being able to bring Stessman and a couple guys from that line into this season and just get started right away running the football with not only Stessman but Marty Brown, I think that was huge. So that North Platte game last year, Stessman's 242 touchdown performance, that was huge for the long term.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not sure there's really anything other than that, because when I think of, great prep events from the time I've had here, I think of the Millard West comeback first, Marty Brown running over people second, and then what happened in these past couple of weeks third. So I'm not really sure there's any other memorable performances. There probably are. I'm sure Alex Bullock had one crazy game somewhere in there that we're forgetting. Maybe A.J. Rollins as well. But, I'm not sure anything can top a 240-plus yard rushing game.
Yeah, one game I want to make sure we don't miss. You were on the call for this one. I wasn't. I hadn't arrived on the scene yet in terms of broadcasting on CPTV. But sophomore year, 2019, I think it was week 4, Prep played Millard North at home, and I think it was 30-10 Mustangs at the end of the third quarter, and Prep came back and won at 31-30. You remember that one?
No, actually.
You don't? Okay.
Let me look up the recap I wrote for
yeah.
Because I'm sure I wrote one.
Yeah, so that was sophomore year.
2019?
2019,
okay.
Yeah, week 4.
Let's see, I've got the write-up here. Caniglio leads CP's comeback. So, let's see, Mason Armstead had 8 catches, 125 yards. Pat Foley kicked a game winner. Vinny Cassiopo, 14 carries, 97 yards. John Caniglio, 14-37 for 174 yards, 3 touchdowns. Prep gave up 448 rushing yards.
Oh my gosh, and still won.
Yeah. So, the funny thing about this is I actually wrote, last year Prep took a tough loss to Westside, but this year is shaping up to be slightly different. So if I go and look at the Westside recap that I would have written for that, that would have been October 2019, I believe. Right? Yeah. That's sophomore year, 2019?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a basketball game. Oh boy, I cannot find it. Wait. Oh, yep. There it is. Westside waltzes to easy win. That was... Yeah, so here's what I wrote. 15 minutes into their matchup against number 6 Omaha Westside, number 10 Creighton Prep held a 14-6 lead. The Junior Jays, who came into this season with title aspirations, appeared to be a title contending team. Slight problem. High school games take 48 minutes. Over the last 33 minutes, the Warriors outscored Prep 43-7.
I mean, you could say the same thing about all these comebacks we're talking about. And that Millard North game I mentioned, that was the Millard West before the Millard West because, I remember leaving that game like, what? Because it was 30-10 going into the third. I mean, a 21-point comeback in the fourth quarter is crazy, and then you had a 29-pointer the year later.
Our sophomore year, I feel like it was kind of a bubble waiting to pop because the Omaha North game,
overtime. Yeah.
Omaha Central only won by 4. Lincoln High was a blowout. Millard North had to be a comeback. Westside crushed us, and then we lost to Columbus.
We barely beat them
by 2. And this is one of my favorite prep moments of all time. I predicted that the Omaha Northwest game would be a lot closer than it actually was. I predicted that we'd win by 14-17. We ended up winning 61-0. So
the guys are all over you for that. I remember.
It was John McClay specifically that I remember, just find me all, hey, Breezeman, what the heck was that, man? And it's just you guys haven't looked good all year. I mean, I'm sorry about that. They ended up losing 3 straight to close out the year. 46-23 to Millard South, 42-14 to Elkhorn South, and then 23-13 in a West Side rematch. So I do not regret saying that I discovered the unfortunate flaws of that prep team a little before the prep team did. I mean, gave up 544 yards in that West Side game. The defense was bad.
Yeah, it wasn't like this year's defense, that's for sure.
Yeah, Cole Payton got 5 touchdowns in that sophomore year game. And then junior year, wait. Oh, I'm so confused as to when all these games were. Was it?
Which one are you looking for?
Junior year was the 27th of August in 2020.
Yeah, that was the 42-0 loss.
Yeah, Prep went 4 of 24 passing the ball. Or no, wait,
that was this year.
That was, never mind. Oh boy. I'm not sure if I wrote a recap for that, I cannot find it. Oh well. Anyway, yeah, that started off the year a little rough, 42-0. And then, as you mentioned, close win against Papio, lost to Lincoln Southeast. Then the Millard West game turns things around a bit. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to beat Millard South in the playoff, but I'd say that junior year was really good at building for the future because there were a lot of underclassmen that made contributions. Obviously, you had guys like Alex Bullock, A.J. Rollins, guys like that. Who was the quarterback on that team? Meisenberg, yeah. You had guys like him, all those upperclassmen making plays, but there was still a lot of contributions from other underclassmen as well, like Ryan Carney, Stessman, that made you think, okay, maybe Prep's going to be built pretty solid for this next year. And then, holy cow, that next year ended up being pretty fun, I'd say.
Yeah, there were a lot of fun games this year. Most enjoyable one to call this year, I mean, we didn't ever really get a close one except for you and Alex in the playoff game. Obviously didn't go the way we wanted, but in terms of the regular season, it seemed like every week we called, except for Westside, was, all right, Prep's got another top 10 team coming into the building. This could be pretty close. Junior J's are going to have to battle pretty hard to come up with a win tonight. And then it just went, it went crazy. You had the Lincoln Southeast game when Prep was 9 and Southeast was 4. Prep won at 41-7.
It was the other way around.
No, Prep was 9, Lincoln Southeast was 4. Lincoln East, Prep was 4.
Oh, Lincoln Southeast. Oh, okay.
So Southeast was 41-7, and then Lincoln East, which was a game, I was like, oh, yes, this is going to be incredible. And we got a shootout coming. Noah Walters is going to throw for a bunch of yards. Marty Brown's going to run for a bunch of yards. This is going to be insane.
One team lived up to their end of the bargain.
And then it was 52-7.
Yeah. I think that was my favorite game.
Yeah, that one was a lot of fun. Just because it was our last one, and it was a really cool matchup just to prepare for, honestly.
Yeah. I will say 7-3. None of the losses except for the West Side loss were really discouraging, and even the West Side loss.
You knew the defense, and that West Side loss was there.
Even the West Side loss wasn't really horrible because it's just like, okay, so the offense has had a couple bumps in the road because they can't really throw the ball right now. If they figure that out, at least become average throwing the ball, we could really shock some people. The Bell West game, I will maintain forever, was a winnable game for Prep that was lost on 1 or 2 defensive lapses and 1 or 2 offensive lapses. Yeah. Prep was right in that game till the very end. And then even the Grand Island game.
3 fourth quarter turnovers.
Defense did all they could. Obviously, you're going to see the 30 points scored by Grand Island and think that defense didn't really live up to their end of the bargain. That's the most points they've allowed all year. But the fact remains that the defense did not look bad against Grand Island. Kite and Fife just looked really good. So now an interesting category for you. You mentioned games that you love to call this year. Is there any game that you would have most liked to call but didn't get a chance to?
Ooh, okay. I'm gonna think back to sophomore year. I don't think there were any good road games sophomore year. Ooh, that's challenging.
Yeah, I mean, sophomore year, the Omaha Central game was an away game. That was kind of close.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, not really.
Man, that's a tough one. Probably Millard West this year, honestly, just because, I mean, I remember the environment in that game was incredible. Obviously, Millard West has one of the best student sections in the state, and Prep easily able to rival that. So you had a packed house at Buell Stadium. You had the narrative coming in. Everybody knew what happened last year with the Prep Millard West game, the big comeback, and then just the performance that Marty Brown had. And even that game itself was a comeback as well,
Mhm.
because the Junior Jays were down 14-0 early. I think it was 21-7, 21-14.
It was 21-14.
21-14, yeah. So Prep had to come back a couple different times, but able to pull it off. So I think that would have been a fun one to call. The Papio game this year that we didn't get a chance to would have been nice, because Marty Brown had a big game there as well, and the defense and special teams were really good. But yeah, I mean, really any game this year, honestly, just the Papio South game when Marty had the 91-yarder. I mean, any game this year would have been fantastic, just because the way Prep was able to run the ball, and that's a lot of fun to watch.
I'll say it's the Papillion La Vista game at home this year, just because that felt kind of like the West Side game at first. I remember saying something to the effect of, "Oh boy, the offense looks bad again."
Yeah.
And then punt block Pargo arrived on the scene. I got a punt block for a touchdown that opened the floodgates and what would end up being a 30-3 victory for Prep. And I remember saying, he probably just doesn't want the offense to give the ball away again, so he's making sure they don't get a chance to touch it. Obviously, offense improved significantly after that game, but that was really the first indication that Prep was going to have something special, because Marty rushed for 141 yards and a score that game. Jack Piernicki went 7-13 for 133 yards and a touchdown. The defense had 2 picks, one from Pargo, one from Asher Anderson. Pargo also had the blocked punt. And then the defense obviously 102 passing yards allowed, only, if my math is correct, 26 rushing yards allowed. So.
I think I remember I was putting together stats after the game for that one, and Papio did not rush for much at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty crazy to see.
That was the first game where you realized, okay, this Prep team could be something special.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you ready to move on to college football, or what do you think? What do you think?
You got anything you want to talk about at all?
For college football or for Prep? I think we've covered most of the bases pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
I think, as you said, the first college football playoff rankings have been such a hot topic of debate.
Quick. Best West Side moment.
Best West Side moment. I wish there were more, but I could have had the opportunity in the playoffs if things had gone the way we wanted to, but unfortunately they didn't. But this year would probably have to be my favorite West Side moment.
The safety? I mean, like what else?
Marty Brown's run was. I like Marty Brown's run a lot. Pierce's kick return was. Because that was the start of the drive. So that scoring drive was pretty fun to see. Pierce Johnson having the 70-yard kick return to get it to the 25. Watching him return kicks and punts was a lot of fun this year. Kid's got some speed and some shiftiness as well. Can't wait to see what he does next year. He's just a junior. And then Marty Brown's touchdown run to cap it off, his first touchdown run of the season. He had one last year, so it was his second career.
And that game could have been a lot different, too, if we just started running the ball, because he only had 15 carries for 54 yards.
Yeah, I mean, in all fairness, that was before anybody completely knew that he was going to be that guy. But, I mean, you knew with that touchdown, that was a pretty special run. I mean, the line opened up just enough of a hole. I think he spanned past somebody and then jumped over another guy who was on the ground. So, I mean, you saw a little bit of the skill set that he was able to flash all year long. So, that was probably my favorite West Side moment. But, I mean, just because Prep didn't play well against West Side all 4 years didn't mean that they didn't play well against great teams. I mean, the Bellevue West game was a lot of fun.
I will say the Prep Barstool account was on the Marty train a little early. This is a tweet from, I believe, August 12th.
Yeah, it's got the picture of him where he just looks ripped.
Prayers to anyone who gets in Marty Brown's way this season. I mean,
that was
a bit of
spot on.
Yeah, for sure. But that was fun. I'd say the favorite West Side game was the safety, because it really showed the prowess of the defense, and especially when they were able to get stops despite being pinned back in. Like, that was for sure fun to watch.
All right, so should we move on to college football? I feel like we should
let's do this. I need some rage.
There's a lot going on. So real quick, I'll recap some of the big things from last week.
No, you don't have to.
Yeah, I do. Real quick. Takes me a minute. Michigan State beat Michigan in a top 10 matchup in East Lansing, 37-33. Kenneth Walker, Heisman frontrunner, 5 touchdown runs, 190-plus rushing yards. Wisconsin took down 9th-ranked Iowa, 27-7 in Madison. Cincinnati keeps rolling with a 31-12 win over Tulane.
No. That's only a 19-point win, Tyler. That's not
boy. We'll get to that in a minute. Oklahoma, 4th-ranked team, beats Texas Tech 52-21. Top-ranked Georgia steamrolls Florida, 34-7 in Jacksonville. Auburn beat Ole Miss in the 18 versus 10 matchup, 31-20. And Ohio State took down Penn State, 33-24. Ohio State was the 5, Penn State was the 20. And now this week we have our first college football playoff rankings. I'll just read them off to you, and then we can go off on them from there. Georgia is number 1. Alabama is number 2. Michigan State number 3. Oregon number 4. Ohio State number 5. Cincinnati number 6. Michigan number 7. Oklahoma number 8. Wake Forest number 9. Notre Dame number 10.
All right. So, real quick, I just want to go over last week a little bit. I'm honestly a little disappointed in myself. I didn't watch a single minute of the Penn State-Ohio State game, and that's normally one of my favorite
what were you watching?
non-interested rivalry games. Let me see. I was either like
the Notre Dame game.
No, I was either like at work or. Oh no! I was at a Halloween party. That's what I was doing. Yeah, but other fun games from that week. Your Fighting Irish beat North Carolina. I will say I was right about Iowa State, West Virginia being upset special. Mm-hmm. And I think there was something else. Maybe it was for next week. Yeah, next week, a little sparse right now for the ranked versus ranked games. I mean, I will say that where did it go? Auburn, Texas A&M is going to be like the only decent game to watch with actual implications. Yeah,
I'm watching 9th-ranked Wake Forest against North Carolina because I think North Carolina might be favored at this point. Wake Forest is 9th-ranked. North Carolina is unranked at 4-4.
North Carolina's favored by 2.5.
But Sam Howell was coming off a strong game in South Bend last week.
That's the ABC game. So
Wake Forest is 8-0. Could come to an end this weekend. We'll see. They're going to get tested a little bit.
Well, I just saw a tweet that said, "Good morning to everyone except the College Football Playoff Committee." So, yeah, let's get this started. Yeah. First of all, I can't believe I'm saying this as a Texas fan, but Oklahoma feels a little too low.
Yeah.
They haven't looked impressive, but if you're 9-0, I don't think it's fair to put that team outside of the top 6. I'm not sure Ohio State should be in there. I'm sure they looked fine against Penn State. You could probably confirm that more than I could, but the home loss to an Oregon team missing Kayvon Thibodeau looks worse and worse as we go along. I'm okay with the committee putting Oregon over Ohio State. I didn't think they would actually do that.
Yeah,
I didn't think
Oregon hasn't impressed anybody for a little while here. Well, Ohio State's been getting a lot better as the season's gone
on. Other than that, I feel like Cincinnati's definitely too low.
They got it.
There is no universe in which they should be below a team that lost to Stanford or a team that lost to the team that lost to Stanford. That's Oregon and Ohio State. Alabama, I suppose I'm okay with being in the playoff just because they've been dominant except for that Texas A&M game. But I'd have Michigan State above them and maybe Cincinnati as well. I think Michigan State's the definite number 2 right now. Wake Forest, I'm okay with them at number 9. You know, the middle is pretty okay with me. I'm not sure why Mississippi State is so high.
The middle's pretty inconsequential. Once you get below the top 8, it's kind of
not entirely sure why Wisconsin's in. Where's UTSA? They're unbeaten.
That too.
Where's all the other unbeatens, like Coastal Carolina, say? I mean, the AP Top 25, I'd say, is a far better look at things. UTSA is 16th in that. Houston and Coastal Carolina are both in there. Louisiana Lafayette, Fresno State, SMU, all in there. They're closer to the bottom than the top, but at the very least they're in there. And then one disagreement I have with the AP poll is the Ohio State-Oregon. They've got Ohio State 6th, Oregon 7th, but again, you could probably just blame that on the Stanford loss. But Georgia, Cincinnati, Alabama, Oklahoma. The one thing I'd maybe do there is flip out Alabama for Michigan State. That's the AP polls rankings, not the playoffs. But if those are the rankings, I'm okay with that. I just wish that the committee would put Cincinnati in, but based on what we've seen so far this year and from the committee's body of work in the past, it's unlikely.
Yeah, I don't think anything has screamed expand the playoff quite like this year's first college football playoff rankings have. I mean, what does Cincinnati have to do? I mean, they're 8-0. They've beaten everybody that they should have beaten. They have a top 10 win over Notre Dame, just like Oregon has a top 10 win over Ohio State, and Oregon has a loss. Yet Cincinnati's still on the outside looking in at number 6. I mean, you've got to expand this thing at some point, right?
Well, or just get some new people to pick, because an article I saw, the athletic directors of schools from the 5 different Power 5 conferences are in on that playoff committee. You know who gets money if a school from their conference makes the playoff? I'm not suggesting that it's rigged, but it certainly seems like it is
suspicious,
unfairly biased in favor of Power 5 teams. And I mean, look at what Cincinnati did last year. There were arguments that they should have made it last year because, like, well, hey, they're undefeated. They've beaten everybody by wide margins. What else do they have to do? Committee's like, oh, well, they don't really have, like a top 10 win, a really impressive win. This year, they got the top 10 win, and it's still the playoff chair is going, oh, well, who else have they beaten? Who has Oklahoma beaten? Who, for that matter, has Alabama beaten?
Good point.
Like, Georgia, I'm okay with because they've looked absolutely dominant, and except for Clemson, they've just demolished everyone they've played. They've got the strength of schedule. Michigan State, at this point, has the strength of schedule to get in. I could maybe even argue for Ohio State, especially if they end up beating both teams from Michigan later. But what else does Cincinnati have to do at this point?
Exactly.
They're the number 2 team in the country, according to basically everyone except the people who decide who the number 2 team in the country is at the end of the year. The crazy part is people are still working on, like, what would the BCS computers say? Like, we saw those. Since he's number 2 in that.
Yeah, there you go. So how would you do a top 6 with all this being said? I think Georgia's obviously number 1.
Georgia's number 1. I think Cincy's number 2. I remember I texted you this a couple of days ago.
You got Cincy at 2 over Michigan State?
No. Okay. Here, my top 4. Georgia, Michigan State, Cincinnati, Bama. That's the top 4 right now.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Yeah, I'll go with that too. I'd go Georgia, Michigan State, Cincinnati, Bama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Michigan, Oregon.
Yeah, you lost me at the Ohio State over Oregon. The head-to-head.
I don't buy a week 2 head-to-head. I mean, it's been almost 2 months now since those 2 teams last met.
It was in the horseshoe.
Okay, they're completely different teams now. Oregon has not impressed anybody since then.
Ohio State lost a lot of guys to injury.
Well, okay, that still means they're not as good a team now. Ohio State has been getting better as the season has gone on. They just got a big win over Penn State. Yeah. And now if they can beat Michigan State and Michigan, they'll be in great position to jump over Oregon. So
yeah,
I got Ohio State over Oregon.
Personally, my 5 through 10 is Oregon, Oklahoma, Michigan, Wake Forest, Notre Dame, and Ohio State.
Notre Dame over Ohio State.
Notre Dame over Ohio State. I'm going with that. But, and like
even as a Notre Dame fan, I don't know about that.
Because here's the thing: I gave you my reasoning. Cincy is a better team than Oregon. Therefore, a loss to Cincinnati is more palatable than a loss to Oregon.
But look at the games outside of the losses. I mean, Ohio State has a ranked win over Penn State.
But that would require me to do
Ohio State has...
That would require me to do more research than I wanted to. So
you know better than anybody, just judging by how much you like hating on me and Notre Dame. I mean, you know better than anybody that Notre Dame is not impressed outside of the close loss to Cincinnati this year. Even that game, they didn't impress. I mean, it's been a bunch of close wins over mediocre teams that at one point were ranked but aren't anymore. Ohio State has actually won a few games in blowout fashion. Notre Dame has been looking a little bit better offensively, though. They're starting to run the ball, which is a good sign. So we'll see how it plays out.
Have
Obviously,
they solved their quarterback problems yet?
I mean, Jack Cohn still is the guy. He's been sharper the last couple of weeks. Tyler Buckner's still getting some snaps here and there. But, I mean, the main story right now is just that Kyron Williams is starting to get going finally. So that's good to see if you're a Notre Dame fan. But I tell you what, the Big Ten's going to be seeing a lot of shifts over the next few weeks. We're going to be able to really tell where Michigan State, Ohio State, and Michigan are at because Michigan State plays Ohio State in a couple weeks. Michigan plays Ohio State in 3 weeks. So,
yeah.
I mean, we're going to know. Michigan State plays Penn State, too.
It's going to be a pretty fun wind down to the season. Even a team like a Minnesota or an Iowa could really make some noise there. And I think we could probably cover baseball pretty quickly. The Atlanta Braves win the World Series, a victory for everyone in the United States outside of the city of Houston. Jorge Soler won the World Series MVP thanks to a couple of bombs in games 1, 4, and 6, I believe.
Yep.
Royals traded him away at the deadline.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to make of that trade at this point. I mean, obviously you want to be angry because, we lost the World Series MVP. What did we get back? But, I mean, what was Soler going to be in Kansas City? I mean, it was looking very much like the 48 home run season he had in 2019 was a fluke because he started the year with something like a 190, 180 batting average. And by the time we traded him at the deadline, he only had about 9 or 10 home runs and a 205 average. So, I mean, I think the move was to just trade him while you could get something back for him, and the Royals did get a top 20 pitching prospect from the Braves back. We'll see if he can become anything, but hey, good for Soler.
Mm-hmm.
Great for his country, Cuba.
Good for the world.
Yep, good for the world. Soler he had a tough year with Kansas City, but managed to go to Atlanta, find his power once again, and then got hit with COVID-19 at the end of the NLDS, came back, hit some big home runs, and I tell you what, I can't believe the Braves were able to pull that off because you got to remember, they lost Ronald Acuna Jr. 3 weeks before the deadline, and then when they were in that tight race in the NL East with the Phillies and the Mets, and everybody's saying, it's tank division, it's the MLB's version of the NFC East and the NFL, Braves went out and they made more moves than anybody else. They redid their whole outfield, and it was pretty cool to see because they went and got Adam Duvall for their outfield. He was great in the regular season. They got Jock Peterson for the outfield. He was their best player in the NLDS. They got Eddie Rosario for the outfield. He was NLCS MVP, and then Jorge Soler, another outfielder who was World Series MVP. So it was pretty cool to see how the deadline played out.
It just shows how, for all sports, but especially for baseball where it's a long season and even after the trade deadline you still got plenty of time, how if you're an ownership group or a general manager's group and you want to try and win a World Series, you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you build a team that looks really good and then injuries hit you or slumps hit you and you're like, okay, this isn't enough to win a World Series. If you want to, you can go and find a team that can win the World Series. Now, they didn't pick up a juggernaut, I don't think, but they picked up a team that meshed, that got hot at the right time, and it ended up being enough for them.
Yeah, exactly. And they had some experience as well in there with Freddie Freeman and Dansby Swanson, those type of guys. So, yeah, great to see the way the Braves did it. So they win the World Series over Houston. We'll know our national champion in college football in just a couple months. NFL, we'll have our game picks for the NFL on Twitter this week. I still have I'll still have a 1-game lead over Brendan. I think we'll do that tonight probably.
Yeah.
I mean, we can just pick the Thursday night game and then do the main Sunday games later on Saturday or something.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll figure that out, but that's about it. Even though prep football and prep sports are over for the next few weeks or so, we'll be coming back each and every week to talk about everything else, college and professional. So keep it right here. We'll have all the updates.
College basketball
anything else? Soon. Yeah, college basketball is coming soon. We've already seen guys like Chucky Hepburn and Hunter Salas at Wisconsin and Gonzaga.
Very well in exhibition games,
yeah. That's fun to watch.
Other than that, Paul George for MVP. The Lakers look scary now. But other than that, thanks for tuning in. Keep tuning in. Even if we won't talk about prep football, there's still plenty more sports to talk about, and we will have those for you weekly. So come on back next week, probably Thursday again. Wait, no, Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Or
yes.
Friday.
Wednesday or Friday.
No, yeah, we don't have school Friday. Wednesday. Yep.
So we'll
Wednesday.
be back again next Wednesday. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to Creighton Prep Football for an amazing season and a great 4 years. And we'll see you all again next week.
All right. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you next Wednesday.